Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Allie's Book Nook. Today I'm going to share with you the 11 books that I read in the month of January. So, before we get started, I will tell you my book stats for the month. I got these off of Storygraph. I just started using the Storygraph app this year and I really like it. So now I'm using Storygraph and Fable to track my reading, and I pretty much stopped using Goodreads. These other two apps are just so much better and modern and engaging and much more features. And Goodreads literally hasn't been updated in like a decade. And so I'm just kind of done with them. And going into the rest of this year, I plan on just using Storygraph and Fable. And those are both free apps as well. So according to Storygraph, I read 11 books and I DNF'd one. I finished 11, I DNF'd one. I read a total of 4,499 pages. My average time to finish a book was 3 days. 100% of the books that I read were fiction. And within that, I read primarily thriller, followed by mystery, then horror, then science fiction, and then historical. And some of them overlapped. I think the historical probably overlapped with the sci-fi. My average rating was 4.25 stars. So out of the 11 books, I did all of them on audio, but in tandem, I read 8 of them in print and 3 of them with my e-reader, with my Kindle. My favorite book of the month was the last one I'm going to talk about, the last one I read of the month. And I'll tell you my least favorite when I get to that. My best reading streak was 26 days. So let's dive in. I actually had 3 really good books, really solid 5 stars. And my first one of the year that I read was a 5-star book. And that was The One by John Marrs. So I talked in a different video about, I think it was my book haul for December. My neighbor made a reading bingo for me, a blackout book bingo. It's the Super Bingo reading challenge. And so I'm trying to, as I read my books, is there any of those boxes that I could fill in? And this one, I was able to mark off the dystopia category. I would consider this dystopian. So I read this in paperback and ebook. And this is written by John Marrs. It's published by Hanover Square Press. Dystopian thriller / speculative thriller, published in 2017. It's 438 pages or 11 hours on audio. It was $9.50. $9.50. I got this used. Oh yeah, at my local bookstore, but it was still $9.50, and then it was free to listen to on Libby Audio through my library. I started this, I started it actually on the last day of December, 12/31/25, and I finished it on January 2nd, so about 3 days. This was in my Libby holds for about 5 months before I finally got it to become available to me. So it is a popular book. That's one of the downsides with Libby, is a lot of the popular books, my library doesn't have a lot of copies of them, and so there is quite a long wait, but it was worth the wait. So this book, it takes place in the near future, and this is the first, I believe, of his speculative fiction books, I think. He has a few others, but kind of all in the same universe, but they're standalones. And this one, this company has come out with a DNA matching test that you can do. You can submit your DNA and it will match you with your perfect soulmate, the one for you. And so think of like 23andMe or something like that, but matches you with your perfect soulmate. And this was written 2017, so 9 years ago when this was published. And, maybe it doesn't seem quite as far-fetched now. But as you can imagine, when you start playing with things like that, things can go bad. And people start getting matched with people they wouldn't expect, or maybe they're already in a relationship and they're happy, but they take this test and they find out their partner is not who they're supposed to be matched to. So this takes it's got like I think 8 different POVs, which was slightly confusing, but not too bad. And so it follows like these multiple stories of people that took the test. And all of the chapters are really short. So I did like that, alternating perspectives in short chapters. And yeah, these are spoiler-free reviews, so I don't want to give too much away, but this was really good. This was a solid 5-star. And this is the first book that I used my new embosser on that I got last year from the library of Myself with an Owl, because this is one that I do want to hold on to. So yes, The One by John Marrs. Oh, let me tell you a little bit about what I wrote in my notes. I said it's so good. It was my second John Marrs book. I actually liked this much better than the other one I read, which was Keep It in the Family. That wasn't bad, but that was one of his thriller books, and I liked this a lot better. I thought it was a lot more memorable. Now I want to read all. I think there's 4 or 5 in this dystopian universe. It actually kind of reminded me of like an episode of Black Mirror or like Twilight Zone, if Twilight Zone had shows coming out today. Technical reliance, shortcomings. Would you take the test? I was kind of asking myself that as I read the book. Short paced, twisty, or fast paced, twisty, so good. Definitely. Oh no, self-published, found on Amazon. Oh, so this book, he used to be, John Marrs used to be a journalist, and this was his first book that he self-published, and an editor found it on Amazon, picked it up and read it, and the rest is history. He is not a journalist anymore. He is a full-time professional, very famous writer. And look at this picture of him on the back. He has such a baby face in this picture. I follow him on Facebook, and he's hilarious. And yeah, not that he looks old now, but he just like has such a baby face on there. I thought it was pretty cute. So they're going to have a 10th anniversary edition of this coming out soon. And I imagine it'll be, probably a different cover, maybe sprayed edges. I'm hoping for. I'm happy with this copy myself personally, but if you haven't read it and you're looking to read it, maybe wait until later this year when the 10th anniversary edition comes out. So maybe it was published in the UK in 2016 or just written in 2016, but this one was published in 2017. So overall, I gave this 5 stars, characters 4.5, and everything else 5. Plot, story, readability, and overall rating 5. Yeah, this was good. This might, I know it's early to say, but this might make it into my top reads of 2025. I actually had 3 books this month that 2026 I feel might make it into my top reads of 2026. Okay. The next book I read was another really solid 5-star read for me, and that was 11/22/63 by Stephen King. And this was a big book, but it was really good. This is another one I said might make it into my top reads of the year. And it was my second book of the year. So I read this in paperback and listened to it in audio. It's written by Stephen King, published by Scribner. And I would call this a sci-fi historical fiction thriller. I guess you could put it in any of those categories. It was published in 2012. It's 849 pages or 30.5 hours on audio at 1.0 speed. I actually bought this new at a bookstore, so I paid $25 for it, $24.99, and then listened to it free on Libby. But this is another one that was on my Libby holds for a long time. Did I write down how long? I think it was about 6 months. I think I put this in my Libby holds in June of last year, and it just became available. I started this on January 3rd, and I finished it on January 9th. So this is about a guy that he is told about this portal that can take him back in time into the 1950s that his friend knows about. And his friend's been going there for a while, but he's old now. He has cancer, and he wants this main character to continue what he wasn't able to do, which is to try to stop the assassination of JFK. And so he goes back in the 50s, and he has to live there for, I don't know, several years until the date of the assassination in 1963. And during that time, he is doing some recon, trying to follow the assassin and make sure Oswald is actually the assassin before he tries to stop him. And he's also living his life because he has to be there for so long. So he adapts to life in the 50s and early 60s in a simpler time. He, has a career. He has relationships. All these things that you would have in a normal life. Well, meanwhile, he's still actually from the future and trying to stop this assassination. And so, yeah, it was really good. I wrote down quote on page 477. Let's see what I said about that. History repeats itself is another way of saying the past harmonizes. And they say that throughout the book. The past harmonizes. The past harmonizes. And also the past, time is kind of, it doesn't like to be changed or messed with. So he does try to do certain things that he's unsuccessful with throughout this time, because or things will come up to try to stop him. He's going to go try to do something, and maybe all these things will happen to prevent him from being able to do that. And so that's kind of an interesting concept. So I liked the sci-fi in here. I liked the historical aspect, learning more about Oswald and JFK, and just like kind of the nostalgia of 1950s, and kind of portrayed as a wholesome time. Everyone smoked cigarettes all the time, but it was very atmospheric. You really felt like you were in there with this big of a book. And it was different than a lot of his other books. It wasn't really scary horror. It did have references to It. A lot of this took place, not a lot, but some of it took place in Derry, Maine, which I haven't read It, but I could tell from this that is where the story It occurred. And there's multiple references to the story It in here. There's also a reference in the first chapter to The Stand when they talked about Grandma Moses's paintings. It's been a long time since I read The Stand, but I picked up on that. I think this might be a new favorite of his. Is it my all-time favorite of his? I don't know. I think I need to go back and read Dolores Claiborne to see if that still stands as my all-time favorite. I also really liked Misery, but this is definitely right up there in the runnings. Yeah, this is really good. Very strong character development in this book. It was a great premise, and I actually really liked the ending. I'm obviously not going to tell you the ending, but I really was satisfied with it. I liked it. Time is obstinate. They said that a lot in here. Time is obstinate. It doesn't like to be messed with. It's stubborn. It refuses to change. Tries to refuse to change. So I gave this 5 stars across the board. Characters, plot, story, readability, and overall rating. 5, 5, 5, 5. Yeah, this is a commitment. It's a big book, but it's worth it. I really enjoyed this. And this was another one that got... Oh, so my little embosser, it wasn't big enough to fit up in the blank spot on this page, and so it came with some foil stickers, so I did that on there because I do plan on keeping this in my library. There's a couple other books I read this month, at least one that I plan on keeping in my library, but I haven't used my embosser on it. When I go through my reorganize my library, I will go ahead and emboss some of those books then. And that actually hit my book bingo box for time travel. Okay, so there's 3 other books that I started reading in January that I'm either still reading or finished in February. So I'm going to skip past those. And the next book that I finished in January is The Girl Who Was Taken by Charlie Donnelly. So this book was, I read this in paperback and audio, published by Kensington. This is a mystery thriller, published in 2017, 395 pages or 11 hours on audio. I paid $7.27 new for this on Amazon when they were having a sale. And then $3.99 also on sale on Audible. I started it on January 9th and I finished it on January 12th. So again, about 3 days. So this book might have been my favorite Charlie Donnelly book that I have read so far, because it didn't seem like there was one book of his I really liked. Well, the other 2 books I read of his, I did guess some of the ending. I did not see the ending coming in this one. And the other ones also, at least one of them had some stuff that was kind of far-fetched. This didn't have that. And this is a more recently published book than the other ones that I read. So maybe he's grown a little bit as a writer, but yeah, I thought this was very well done. I did not guess the ending. Great twist in it. So this is about 2 girls that were abducted, and one of them returns and one doesn't. So one of them was like really popular, well liked. Her dad was the local sheriff in town. And then the other girl was kind of like an outcast, not a popular girl. And she came back. But the popular girl, the sheriff's daughter, did not. And so the girl that came back, she was talked into publishing a book about what happened to her experience. But after the book came out, she started to remember that maybe there was more to the story. And so the girl who's still missing, her sister teams up with the one that was found, and they try to do some digging to find the girl that's still missing. Now, the sister in this book, her name is Livia Cutter, and she is a character in at least one other book of Charlie Donnelly's, if not 2. So there are some crossover characters in his books that are in the same universe, and I love that. And I have a bad memory, but that's okay, because you don't have to like remember that to enjoy these stories. They are standalone stories. Just some of them have characters that overlap in the same universe. And he has I think it's on his official website. He put something out online with like a list of what books have what reoccurring characters. But she was in Long Time Gone, but in this story she's younger. So this takes place in that universe earlier than Long Time Gone. A complaint about the physical copy of this is the poor binding. This is a new book. Like I said, I got it from Amazon. And the binding, like, I don't know if I can find it in here, but it's like coming apart at the spine in part of it. And, oh, right here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, I don't appreciate that when I buy a brand new book. I like these editions of his books that are kind of fluffy, fun to hold and to read, but you got to have better quality with the pages being sealed in there. I didn't like that. So there is a pretty interesting twist halfway through this, and I did not see that coming, and then that plays into the rest of the story, which there is more twists as the story goes on, especially at the end. Like I said, I didn't guess that, unlike his other 2 books. So I gave this a 4.75. I've said this in my other books, both other books I read by his, that I still don't think he really likes these armchair detectives or these internet sleuths. because he kind of paints him in a bad light in all of his books. But yeah, I gave this a 4.75 overall. For plot story, I gave it a 5. But everything else was a 4.75. Characters, readability, overall rating. And I would recommend this book. Even though I gave his other 2 books, I think 5 stars, I think this is probably my favorite. So, the next book I read checked off my box, my book bingo for horror. The Charlie Donnelly book didn't check off any boxes, but this one I counted for horror, and this is The Troop by Nick Cutter. I gave this a 3.75 overall, and looking back, that might have been a little high. It's probably more like a 3.5 in retrospect, but I will get into that. So I read this in paperback and audiobook. Written by Nick Cutter, published by Pocketbooks / Summerlin Chester, in the horror genre. This was published 2014, pre-COVID, which I think played a factor in this. It was 510 pages and 11 hours on audio. This was $1 used and then free on Libby. So yeah, I started it on the 12th of January, and then I finished it on the 15th of January. So this book, I will say it hits different in 2025, 2026 than it would have when it was published, because there have been a couple big cultural events since then. COVID and another more recent thing that we've seen a lot of in culture that I'm not going to talk about because it could be a spoiler, but I don't think the COVID thing is. So this book is about, there is this Boy Scout troop in Canada, and they go on this trip every year to this secluded island that has a cabin. And so they are there, and while they're there, very secluded, this guy shows up, and he is, it says, shockingly thin, disturbingly pale, and vicariously hungry. And they're exposed to something far more frightening than any tale of terror. The human carrier of a bioengineered nightmare. A horror that spreads faster than fear. A harrowing struggle for survival with no escape from the elements, the infected, or one another. And it says it's part Lord of the Rings, part 28 Days Later. I would agree with that. So yeah, this guy shows up. He has a bioengineered disease, and now they are all fighting for survival, not only from him, but kind of against one another. And yeah, I will say check your trigger warnings before you read this. There is a lot of body gore, and there is some animal cruelty. And there's one character in here that I don't even think he needed to be in here. And that's why I gave this the lower rating in retrospect than I did. I did not like him. He was gross. There were, if they're going to have him, I guess that's fine. But there were stuff in his past that they brought into the book, scenes of, that we did not need to see. It was just unnecessary. It's like the author was doing it for shock value. And I didn't think it added to the story, and it turned me off from the story. So, I will say his writing style is kind of reminiscent of Stephen King. And it also kind of reminded me of the book The Ruins by Scott Smith. That was a good book. I read that several years ago. And in fact, Scott Smith does, I think it says in the acknowledgments that he read the transcript and provided feedback or something. I don't remember exactly, but I think the author probably was inspired by that story somewhat. And the author, Nick Cutter, that is a pseudonym for the author's real name, Craig Davidson. He's a Canadian author, and he has written multiple books under both names. So yeah, I do still want to read his other book that I have called The Deep that I got for Christmas. I'm still going to give him another chance, but I hope that he's not just like, I hope it's not going to be a lot of like shock value and, you know, body gore and stuff like that. Not that I necessarily mind that, but if that's like what you're banking on for the story, I needed a little bit more depth than that. Because really this trope is not anything that hasn't been done before, more or less. So I gave this like a 3.75. Like I said, now maybe more like a 3.5. Characters 3.25, plot story 3.75, readability 3.5, and overall rating 3.75 to 3.5. And actually, I don't know that I need to keep this book. I'm trying to make my library full of books that I really love, and like books that are just like 3 stars, 3.5 stars. I don't know that I need to keep, but I paid $1 for it, so I'm not mad about that. So I know I didn't give a very positive review here. But if the premise sounded interesting, go ahead and still give it a try, but check your trigger warnings first. Okay. The next book I read, I don't have a physical copy of. I just read it through my Kindle and audio. And this was actually my worst read of the month. Even though, like I said, that review wasn't very positive. This was my worst read other than my DNF. This is my worst read that I finished. And it was Woman Down by Colleen Hoover. This was published by Amazon Publishing. It was kind of marketed as a romance thriller. I think it's a stretch. I would maybe call it like a suspense romance suspense. It was published on January 13th. That was the release date. The physical copy would have been 250 pages, and it's 10 hours on audio. I started it on the 15th and I finished it on the 16th. So it only took me like a day. And that is why I gave it the higher rating that I did, because it was pretty easy to read. But I gave it a 3.25 star rating. So this book, I really was hoping it would be more like Verity, the way that they said it was a romance thriller, but it wasn't. It was kind of drawn out. It's about this lady that she's an author and she kind of has like some bad PR and stuff. So she's trying to write a new book. She goes to a secluded cabin where she usually goes to this lake to do all her writing every year. And this person shows up who seems very like this character that she's writing. And so things progress from there, and she's kind of trying to, the lines kind of get blurred between what is real life and what is fiction. But there's a pretty big part of this plot that I don't want to give away, but I didn't like it. I thought it was kind of tacky, and I guess it didn't really align with my morals, so I didn't really like it. But it was fast paced. It was an easy read. I did guess pretty much most of the ending early on. So I said it was okay, but it definitely wasn't her best work. This is my 4th book of hers. I'm not going to discount her reading her in the future. I think I have a couple unread books of hers, but I mean, I know she's kind of like a popcorn writer anyway. So, and thriller is not like her main genre. She mostly writes romance. And so maybe my hopes were too high, but I think the main reason I didn't like it is just that one big part of the plot that just, I didn't vibe with. So overall 3.25, probably my lowest rated book of the month. And I gave it that for characters and overall rating, but plot, story, and readability, I gave it a 3.5. 24-hour read for me. Okay. I promise my readings will get better, but I do have another one here that I did not love, and that was The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I read this in paperback and audio, and published by St. Martin Griffin. It's a thriller. It was published in 2022. 368 pages or 11 hours on audio. I paid $9.99 for this new at a bookstore in the Denver Mall. Airport. And then the Tattered Cover Branch in the Denver Airport. And then it was free to listen to on audio. Libby. Started it on the 16th of January and I finished it on the 20th, so 4 days. This was another one that was like 6 months Libby hold. I put it on hold in June of last year as well. So basically this is about this lady that her husband passed away. She's kind of in a bad place. She's struggling with substance abuse. Her mom was a famous like Broadway actress, so they have this nice house on this lake. So her mom sends her to go stay at the house and lake and try to get her stuff together. And so she like spies on her neighbors with her binoculars because she has these famous neighbors across the lake, like this famous movie star and her husband. And one day she sees a scuffle, I guess, between them, some questionable interaction, and then the wife goes missing. And so she thinks that the husband might have killed the wife, but she doesn't really have enough evidence. She's an unreliable narrator because of her addiction problems, and it kind of goes from there. The plot twist in this, I couldn't really get behind it. People either love or hate it, and I've seen it done in one other book at least, something similar, but it was done a lot better. This just felt, it didn't go with the rest of the story. So this is primarily a thriller, but there is a little bit of a supernatural horror element in here, and they just didn't mesh for me. So I feel like this is very divisive if people love or hate this book. I guess I didn't absolutely hate it, but it just didn't really work for me. Riley Sager books can be kind of hit or miss for me. This is my 5th book of his, and I think I'll probably unhaul it. My favorite of his was The Only One Left, and I also really liked Middle of the Night, but I didn't really like Final Girls, and I didn't really like, Last Time I Lied. So, yeah, he's kind of hit or miss for me. I'm not going to say what book this reminded me of because I feel like it would give it away. But the other thing that was kind of off about the audio, it was narrated by a female who had an older, like mature voice. I don't know how old she is, but she had that voice of like someone mature, like in their 60s, and the character's like in her 20s. And so that just didn't really go for me. The other thing I didn't like about this book is that the chapters are not numbered. And so it makes it hard to read in tandem with the audio. So yeah, I think I'll probably unhaul this. Overall, I gave it a 3-star rating for characters overall, and then 3.25 for plot and readability. His books are pretty easy to get through, but it was just really, I don't think it was for me. I'm sorry. But this next book I really did like, and that was The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. So yeah, I actually really enjoyed this. This was a thriller. It's published by St. Martin's Press. 291 pages or 9 hours on audio at 1.0 speed. Published in 2023. It was $9.48 at Walmart. I got it last year for like Easter Bunny present with a couple of other books, and I finally got around to reading it because Libby hold times and whatnot. So yeah, it was free through Libby to listen to. Started it on January 20th and I finished it on January 22nd. First of all, this is a beautiful cover. I love her covers. I've also read Reckless Girls and I Own the Villa, and those both have really pretty covers. What was the other book of hers that I read that I really liked the cover? Was there another one? Maybe I'm thinking of a different author. And she has a new book out now called The Storm that I want to read. But anyway, this actually reminded me a little bit of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which was not my favorite book, but the way that they have this old Hollywood character and alternating timelines between her past and her present. So basically, she was an old Hollywood starlet. She had never had any kids of her own, but she had multiple husbands who died, kind of like Evelyn Hugo. And she adopted a son. And she does have other family that lived in this giant estate in, I think it was South Carolina, North Carolina. North Carolina's richest woman. And that family's dysfunctional. So her adult son grows up, moves away, doesn't want anything to do with them. But then she dies, and she leaves him her fortune. So he has to go back to the house with his wife and sort things out. And you start finding out stuff from the past. It, like I said, it's alternating timelines between present and past. She actually, this is like on the back cover, so it's not a spoiler, but when she was a baby, she was kidnapped. And they did get her back and stuff, but that also plays into the story. And so it's like family drama, thriller, a little bit of murder mystery mixed in there, and it was just really an entertaining read. I really enjoyed it. Some gothic vibes in there. Yeah. So I would recommend this book. It was my second book of hers. I read Reckless Girls, and I really like that one too. I do want to read The Storm, like I said. The audio for this had a little excerpt of The Storm, which I think that just came out this month. I think January. So there are 4 different characters that narrate this book on the audio, and I did like that. It has some mixed media elements. So we have the multiple POVs, but it also has letters and articles in here. So I always enjoy that multiple mixed media aspect. And the chapters were short, easy to read. And I did like the final twist at the end. I didn't see it coming, and I liked it. So I actually gave this book 5 stars. Not that it's the most memorable book, and it might not make my top books of the year, but I just had a really good time reading it. And that's a lot of what I base my ratings on. So plot story 5, readability and overall rating 5, and characters 4.5. Yeah, really good book. The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. Okay, the next book that I have to talk about is a book that I don't have in front of me because I just listened to it and read it on my Kindle. So I'll try to go through this pretty quick. The book was The Butterfly Garden. It's actually part of a series. There's 4 books in the series called the Collector series, written by Dot Hutchison. I said it was a thriller, but it's maybe more of like a mystery, I guess. It's published in 2016, 288 pages or 9 hours on audio. And actually got it free through Kindle Unlimited trial. It's on Kindle Unlimited. And if you do that, it has the listen and read, so you can also get it free through Audible. So I started it on the 22nd and I finished it on the 23rd. So this is a story about, there's this guy that basically kidnaps girls, keeps them in this garden, and he calls them his butterflies. And it's alternating timelines between when this girl was held captive and her telling her story to the police. So it does have multiple narrators in the audio and in the book. It's one of the male cop's perspectives as well as the female main character, who is a strong female main character. It was a sad story. The twist at the end seemed kind of far-fetched for me, and I didn't really like the male investigator in the story. I thought he wasn't a very pleasant, likable character. This book was good, but it wasn't as good as I expected it to be. I've heard people hype this book up a lot online, and it was okay for me. It was a quick listen, but it wasn't like the greatest. So I gave it 3.75 stars. Characters 3.5, plot, story, and readability 4, and then overall 3.75. So after I read that, tried to read / listen to the second book in the series called The Roses of May, and I ended up DNFing that. So that was my first DNF of this year. I'm going to try to be better about DNFing books that I don't love, because there's way too many good books out there to be spending time on books that I'm not into. And I did get 11% into this book before I DNF'd it. So that's the second book in the series. And really, it didn't follow the first book very much at all. So it's like a crime thriller. Also published in 2017, 302 pages, 10 hours on audio. Again, it was free through Kindle and Audible. But I started it on the 23rd and I DNF'd it on the 24th because it just didn't grab me by 11%. It was slow and nothing had really happened yet. So it doesn't follow the story of I don't know why they call it the Collector series. I thought that was based on the bad guy in the first book, but this seems to follow the investigators more from the first story. And from what I read online, the rest of the books are following the investigators and their personal lives, and also some of their cases, but a lot of their personal lives. And a lot of people said it kind of felt like more like CSI. Well, I didn't really like especially, like I said, the male investigator in the first one. I didn't connect with him. I thought he was kind of a jerk. And so I wasn't invested in his personal life. I didn't care. And yeah, it just didn't follow the first story. So with it being more like, like a Criminal Minds and more with the investigators, I don't necessarily love police procedural books. Yeah. I gave it a 2.0, which I don't know if that's fair because I didn't finish it, but I said I'm not going to continue the series. I said likely not, but now I'm saying I'm not. It seemed similar. My perspective was similar to what I saw online, but it did get fairly good ratings, I guess, but yeah, too many good books out there to force myself through one I'm not invested in. Okay, I have 3 more books here to talk about, so bear with me. The next one I also don't have in front of me because I did the audio and the ebook, and that is The Stranger in Her House by John Marrs. So that is a domestic thriller, and I actually really liked this book. It was published in 2024, 347 pages or 10 hours on audio, and it was free through Kindle Unlimited trial and the listen and read through Audible. So I started it on the 24th. I did not write down what day I finished it, but it only took me a couple of days. Well, I started my next book on 126, so I must have finished it within 2 days. So I gave this 4.75. I really liked this book. Did I like it more than the one by him? No, but they're very different. This is just like a domestic thriller, where that is, like I said, more of like speculative fiction, sci-fi kind of thing. So this book is basically about elder financial exploitation, but taken to the extreme. And so I really appreciated that because I can tell you that is something that happens in real life. A lot of this stuff with the elder financial exploitation is stuff that can and very much does happen in real life. So one of the things though that I liked about it is leave it to John Marrs to take something like that, a disturbing thing that happens in real life, and take it to the next level. And that was what he did. He really elevated that real concern. So there was so basically this story is about this elderly lady that her daughter comes over, watches her stuff because she has dementia. And then this guy gets hired by the church to come and do some yard work for her. Well, he starts creeping in and taking control. crossing lines, taking advantage of her, of the elderly lady, and shutting out the family. And like, these are all things that really do happen in these types of situations. But then you see like, there's this big twist 40% into the book, and you're like, whoa, what? And then the twists keep coming. There's a final twist at the end that's like huge, and it actually ended on a big cliffhanger. But this was quick, easy to read. There were multiple flawed characters, so you didn't know who to trust. And yeah, I liked that it wasn't just like a whole bunch of like murders or whatever. Not to say that there was or wasn't any in here, but it's based on something that does happen all the time, and I can tell you that. And so this is the third book of his that I read. And yeah, it's my second favorite behind the one, and I do want to read more of his books. So 4.75 overall. I gave it that for plot, story, readability, and overall rating, and then the characters 4.5. One thing that I enjoy about his books is he is a British author, and so he just like some of the phrases and terms and stuff that he uses are very British, and I always think that that's fun to come across those. Okay, so 2 more books. So the next book I have here is Joyland by Stephen King. And I put this for my book bingo as set in summer, but it actually does go into a little bit into the fall, so I might take it off my book bingo for that. So I read this. I gave this 3.5 stars. I read this in paperback and audio. Stephen King book, published by Hard Case Crime / Titan Books. And because it's King, it's classified as horror, but I wouldn't call it horror. I would call it a mystery coming of age book. There's a little bit of paranormal, but it's very little. It's not really a horror book in my opinion. And this came out in 2013. Actually, when I got it, I thought it was a much older work of his because of the cover, but it's supposed to look kind of vintage like that because it does take place in the 70s. 283 pages and 8 hours audio. So a smaller book for Stephen King. I know this says $9.99, but I actually paid $2 for it at Goodwill and then listened to it free on Libby. There wasn't even a hold on Libby. It took me 1 day from the 26th to the 27th. So this was just okay for me, I'm sorry to say. I saw recently a couple of people love this on YouTube. So Chris from Wax Books and Whimsy, and then Ben from The Youngs and the Restless, they both gave it 5 stars. And they both are Stephen King fans. But I don't know, maybe I just wasn't in the mood for this. After reading Stranger in Her House, which was very like twisty and all that, this is definitely slower pace, and maybe I just wasn't in the right place for it. I still was like kind of wanting more twists and turns, and yeah, this is a slower paced coming of age book. So basically it's about this kid that he gets a job out of high school working at this amusement park in the summer, and he decides he's going to stay on through the fall. And there is a story about a woman who a few years ago was killed inside of a ride at the park, and so that's part of the story. And then as he's working there, he befriends a woman and her disabled son that are on the beach every day when he walks to work. And so he forms a bond with them, and it's kind of about that. It's about his heartbreak from breaking up with his first girlfriend. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but that's not really a spoiler. And so then there's also trying to figure out what happened with that murder a few years ago. So anyway, it was okay. Like I said, I was kind of slow paced for me. I guess it could be like a palate cleanser for people. If you do read a lot of like horror or intense books, this could be a palate cleanser. It wasn't my favorite Stephen King book. one thing I didn't like is there's no chapters, and that drives me nuts. There's no chapters. There's little breaks, little hearts for breaks, but that makes it hard when you're trying to do alternating audio and physical books. So that didn't really work for me. I mean, it worked, but I didn't like that. Yeah, so this horror house in here is said to be haunted, but there's very little horror or haunting in the book, maybe a little bit. Yeah, it was nice enough. It wasn't my favorite of his. And then I didn't like at the end of the book, he threw in some political stuff, and he has gotten more political these last couple years, and I just wish he would stick to writing and keep that stuff out, like, regardless. If I agree or not, I'm not here for that. I'm here for the story. So, anyway, tension curve, this was pretty low for tension. The cover doesn't match the story. So, I mean, I understand why it's there if you read the story, but it doesn't do a good job representing the story. And yeah, I think it's just me because a lot of people did really like this book, but I gave it a 3.5 overall. Characters of 4, plot story 3.5, readability and 3.75, and overall rating 3.5. So reading is so subjective, you know. Don't let my okay review stop you, because I know that a lot of people really like this book, and I think I am going to unhaul it so someone else can fall in love with it and enjoy it. Okay, so I hope you're still with me. I have one book left that I finished. Oh, there's 2 books that I am currently working on, and they're nonfiction, kind of theological books, and so I really have a hard time with nonfiction, but I'm working my way through those, so I'm not going to talk about them yet because I didn't finish them. But my next book my last book of the month was my favorite book of the month and my favorite book of the year so far. So good. And that is From Below by Darcy Coates. You guys, I love this book so much. Love it. So this hit my book bingo for an Australian author. But I read this in paperback and audiobook, and written by Darcy Coates, published by Poison Pen. This is in the horror genre. Published in 2022, 469 pages or 12.5 hours on audio. So I paid $6.88 for this on Amazon and during a sale, and $4.51 on Audible, also during a sale. I started it on the 28th and I finished it on January 30th. And this was so good. Gosh, this is the best horror book I've read in a really long time. So narrated by Abby Creighton. I will say I like this cover, but that is supposed to be a scuba diver on there, and every time I look at it, I see a squirrel, and that's his little tail. And so that kind of like distracted me from the feel of the book, like having a silly squirrel on there, but it's not a squirrel, it's a scuba diver. So this book is about, so first of all, I love Darcy Coates. This was my fifth read of hers. And after this, I went right into another one, which I finished in February. But I love her books because she is such a talented writer. She can write scary horror books very well, very descriptive and atmospheric without being vulgar, without, lewdness, any kind of sexual stuff, or like swear words. Not that I'm offended by that necessarily, but the fact that she can write this genre so good without any of those factors, to me, that really shows a lot of talent. Just like I feel like it kind of takes more talent to be a clean comedian that's still funny. That's her, but with horror books. She doesn't, anyway, out of all the books I've read, I could be wrong, she could have other books where those come into play, but the ones I read haven't, and they're still so good and so gripping. So this book is very atmospheric. This is like deep sea horror. So there is this ship in the late 1920s, the SS Arcadia that sunk, and no one knows why, and no one has like went down to look at the wreckage yet. So this dive crew, basically they're commissioned, they're going to do a documentary on it, but it's being paid for by this old guy that has always been fascinated with the SS Arcadia story, because there's a lot of unknowns, like why they crash and like what happened to people. Like there's a lot of unknowns. And so this dive crew, they get commissioned to go down there and do a documentary. And so we have like the old rich guy that owns a boat that they're going there with, and the host of the documentary. We have a couple divers, one experienced diver that they had come with them, a couple cameraman, all of that. And so they go there and they basically have to do multiple dives to get all the footage that they need. And some really scary things start happening. This was it was scary because it had that atmospheric, claustrophobic kind of scary, being so vulnerable under the ocean, like stuck in this ship. But there also was some other potentially paranormal stuff going on that also added to the creepy vibe. So really, really liked that. I did like reading the physical copy better than the audio. Not that the audio was bad. I just like the physical better. Again, I noticed one of her other books I read, this is like nitpicking, but she used the word deluge like all the time, deluge and waith. And I saw multiple uses of those words again in here. But that's just like my only, if I had to like try to nitpick something bad. And it's not even really anything bad. This was so intense. Multiple moments of peril. Atmospheric horror. Very tense. Like, I was like on the edge of my seat reading this, and my husband came home from work, and I was like up late reading this, and I'm just like, like, don't talk to me, like, I was just in the zone. So loved it. 5 stars all the way across. Character 5+. Characters were a 5, readability was a 5, but the plot, story, and the overall rating is a 5+. 6 stars if I could. Yeah, this might be my favorite horror book ever. Maybe. If not, it's very high up there. I just could not put it down, and I want to read all of her books now. I read 4 before this, the Black Winter series, which I highly recommend. Then I read this, and then I immediately went into Black Winter, which is actually more like thriller. Dead of Winter. That's more thriller, but I finished that in February, so I'll talk about that in a different video. And I have a couple more of her books that I plan on reading very soon. She's like one of my new favorite authors. I can't say enough good things about her in general or this book. If you haven't read this book and that sounds interesting, please go check it out. It is so, so, so good. I really loved it. So this is my favorite book by far of the month or the year from Below Darcy Coates. So here we are an hour later. If you're still with me, thank you so much for joining me. I know that was quite long-winded, and maybe I should consider doing like weekly or bi-weekly reading wrap-ups, but let me know if you've read any of these books, what your thoughts are, or if any of these sound interesting. And I will catch you in the next video. Bye, guys.